Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done, so it should be easy. And in any event, when this conflict is over, the Strait will open up naturally. It'll just open up naturally. They're going to want to be able to sell oil because that's all they have to try and rebuild. It will resume the flowing, and the gas prices will rapidly come back down. Stock prices will rapidly go back up.
President Trump last night saying the Strait of Hormuz will open up naturally when the war with Iran is over. That comes as more than 30 countries will meet virtually today to discuss ways to get heavy traffic moving again through the strait. The meeting will be chaired by the UK's Foreign Secretary. The United States will not attend. Let's bring in former Treasury official and Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Rattner with charts on the importance of that key waterway and the other economic impacts of the war. Steve, let's start with the Strait of Hormuz. Does it just open up naturally?
I don't honestly see how, Mika. Look, I think of all the things the president said last night. That was one of the most incredible. You brought in Dr. Brzezinski earlier in the show. Let me bring in Colin Powell's doctrine, the Pottery Barn doctrine, which is if you break it, you own it. We broke it. We should own it. And the idea that we're just going to go leave and let the Europeans somehow figure out the Strait of Hormuz is really ridiculous. So let's, as a reminder, as you say, talk about how important the Strait of Hormuz is. 20% of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, 20% of the oil. And of course, these are countries that are familiar to people: Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, Iran, Kuwait, and Qatar, all depend on the Strait. There are a couple of pipelines that get a little bit of the oil out of there, but virtually all of it has to pass through the Strait. We have no alternative. This oil disruption, many of us remember the 1970s. Again, we're doing a little bit of history today. The 1970s embargoes cost us less than 10% of the world's oil. This is 20% of the world's oil. So this is the largest oil supply disruption in history by a factor of 2, going all the way back to the Suez Crisis in 1956.
Yeah. You know, Steve, if for any reason Richard Haas, the chairman emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, is watching this YouTube clip later in the afternoon, which millions of people always watch your YouTube clips on these charts, he will spit his Pim's cup out when he hears what I'm about to say to you. And I'd love to get your read on it. Richard Haas and Donald Trump actually struck a similar theme, whether either one of them know that or would want to admit it. Richard Haas's idea is blockade the Strait. And if you blockade the Strait and say, if you know, either everything gets out or nothing gets out, and that will force Iran into a position where they have to strike a deal with us. Whereas the president is saying it will naturally reopen itself because the Iranians don't have any other economic choice at the end of the day. Speak to both of those things, your thoughts on what Richard said, and also just the logic of the president saying at some point the Iranians are going to have no other option than to open up the Strait.
Yeah, let's start with the president, because that was kind of gobbledygook. Yes, the Iranians may want the Strait open for their oil, but it doesn't mean they have to open it for everybody else's oil. They essentially control the Strait through those 3 or 4 small islands right where the Strait is only about 21 miles wide, and they can turn that on and off at their will, and they're doing that now. There are reports that some tankers are paying them as much as $2 million to allow them to get through the Strait. So they're like a policeman at a toll booth, and they decide which cars go through the toll booth. So the idea that because they want to get their oil out, they're going to let everybody else's oil out doesn't make any sense in the world to me. And then if you turn that around, and so if you take that first point, then I think Richard actually has a point, that if they're going to use it to just get their own oil out and nobody else's, then you should think about blockading the Strait. Now, that doesn't comport with the president saying we're going to leave in 2 or 3 weeks. That would put us in a position of, just like we blockaded Cuba back in the 1960s, that would put us in a position of having to keep a lot of military assets there for a long time.
So, Steve, let's move to your second chart, and we talk about the ripple effects. It's not just high gas prices. It goes out into food prices and fertilizer and everything else, but also interest rates, what people might be paying as they try to buy a home or pay off credit cards or anything else.
Yeah, I mean, Joe made the right point at the beginning of the show about how oil is a worldwide commodity. The president said, well, we've got all that we need. We have all that we need, but it trades on world markets, and therefore our prices of oil go up as well. And by the way, you can see, as you mentioned at the beginning, the market reaction. Not only are stocks going to be down significantly today, but oil prices are up significantly today because the market did not hear any solution to this problem. But let's look at what the impact is on us. So we use, obviously, gasoline at the pump and so forth, but it also filters all the way through our economy in other ways that may not be obvious. Airline fares may be a little bit obvious. Fertilizer for food, which then causes food prices to go up. Diesel prices for truckers, which causes the cost of all goods to go up, all a factor in this. And so what's been happening is that the economists have been gradually raising their inflation forecasts for this year. Inflation was running at about 2.4%, as low as 2.4% before this started. That was the Federal Reserve's projection. Now you have people like the OECD, respected international group, saying it could be as high as 4.2% this year. And all of that is way above the Fed's target of 2%. Even the Fed thinks 2.7%. So what does that mean? It means that the Fed will not be able to cut interest rates the way it expected to. Here's where we thought interest rates were going before the war started, down, 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 trying to get mortgages more affordable, trying to get car loans more affordable. Now we see them staying higher for longer, eventually, hopefully going down. But this also has a major effect on consumers. So this will have a significant effect on our economy, regardless what the president wants to say about how we have all the oil and gas that we need.
And Steve, as we move to your last chart, obviously, as you say, oil prices hurting consumers here in the United States and around the world, but they do benefit at least one rogue actor.
Yeah, they do benefit Russia. We had, you know, and one of the great ironies of all this is that we did give both Russia and Iran some relief from the oil sanctions that we have against them. And so you can see Russian gas, oil and gas revenues have bounced around based on oil prices, but they were, at the moment, because of our sanctions and prices being reasonable, their revenues were pretty low. We are giving them $17 billion a month of extra revenue because of higher oil prices and because we're letting more of their oil into the world market. So this is a bit of a gift for Russia. And this may continue, and both the impact on Russia and the impact on our own consumers, because if you look at what the market is expecting for oil prices, you have the big jump, of course, but even all the way out here 5 years, the market believes that oil prices will be higher than it thought before this war started because there's been infrastructure destroyed. There's been now a lot of concerns about supply lines and supply chains. And so the impact of all this could be fairly long-standing. And so, again, I think the president was pretty Pollyannish last night about what the actual impact will be.
All right. Morning, Joe. Economic analyst Steve Rattner, as always, thank you very much for bringing the charts.